You can make yogurt. There was one company that was selling honeyberry yogurt, and it had the disgusting bluettes in it. You know what bluettes are, right? Fake things that aren't blueberry, but they're dyed blueberry. They're like little pieces of I don't know, wheat or something that are dyed. Well, they were making honeyberry yogurt, and one of our propagators, Curtis, I believe, sent them a whole bunch of angry phone calls and emails, and you did it too, and it has disappeared from the Saskatoon stores. I hope. Like, why would you, a brand new industry, why would you make a cheap imitation when the original isn't even out yet?
And then we're using perfume that was derived from Lonaceria japonica, which is just about nothing to do.
Oh, gee, that's.
And so
you found out more details about that.
It was a disgusting perfume. They didn't even use real japonica perfume. They used a synthetic japonica perfume. They mixed it with this bluette stuff, stuck it into this yogurt, and used Haskap Canada's web
yeah,
page.
right. That's right. They put Haskap Canada webpage on it of all the nerve, like not having the right. Linking to the grower that you're not buying your fruit from to make it sound like you had put it in there. One of the food experts in Japan told me, occurred to me to ask, that actually Haskap, if stirred into yogurt, extends the life of yogurt for a few days or something, but I don't think she ever published anything on that. And of course it makes a nice jam. And this was something we did when, before we got funding. We made all these little jam jars and sold them for outrageous prices. And it funded like a summer student. We were doing like $5 for a little tiny thing like that, and people bought it and liked it. And next year we got funding, I think. But it was really nice to be able to ship something to different people, or just give it to try out. They could get somebody, a real enthusiastic person, 10 of them. At the Vitinord conference, where we gave one of the organizers one of these jars, he took that jar and took coffee stirs, and he had like 70 people try Haskap. Like, how could you do it with a little jar like that? 70 people had tried it. Anyway. Tarts and stuff. So that's kind of what we did for many years. But we used to have people that come to the Ag College. One of the guys who worked with high schools would make ice cream up and give it to the kids visiting us. So he would make cherry and Haskap. And one year we got this nice looking ice cream that was colorful but didn't taste anything like Haskap. And it kind of got me curious, well, at what level does Haskap taste like Haskap? Or when is it just a food dye? I found out later that they had kept back a whole bunch of our fruit. And because the next year they said, can we have another 7 pounds of Haskap because we need it for this dessert for this banquet? I'm going, well, how 7 pounds won't do? Oh, we got some from last year. And I'm thinking, but you were supposed to put that all in the ice cream. So with the rain we've been having, we had all these students that we couldn't do anything in the field, so we took to the food lab for almost 2 weeks, trying Haskap with different things, trying to uncover the mystery of how little Haskap they used in that ice cream, among other things, right? So kind of like Haskap as a food dye. Now the reason Haskap has food dye potential is, this is an unformed berry again, it has skin there, a skin that covers both, that has skin on both sides of that. So that berry actually has 4 times more skin or more than a berry of similar size, let's say like a blueberry, right? So, and the skin is where the dyes are made. So the anthocyanin levels of Haskap are out the roof. So this is 5% Haskap, and this is a thin little vial, right? It looks a little darker than on the screen here. But this is darker than any cranberry juice at 5%. At 10%, you can sort of see light. 15%, it might as well be black. You can't really see it. So that shows how concentrated it is. I kind of imagine what would a big processor do. You know, you'd probably take your frozen berries and pour off all the juice, but then you might try steaming the rest of them. Has anyone here used this kind of apparatus? Just a few people?
No.
You have the berries up here, you have water down here, and then the middle plate collects the juice. So we just filled this whole thing up and collected the juice, and we kind of measured each 2 cups that came out and tasted it. This tasted great for like 3 cups. Remember, all stuff had already been, juice had already been poured off, so this was the has-beens. The 4th one didn't taste right. It tasted like something, the flavor had gone. So if you're going to use this method, make sure you taste your batches as they come out, unless you just save that 4th and 5th one for tie-dyeing experiments or something. But don't count on it being a juice for a product to use. I'm sure there's giant versions of this that are worthwhile. The interesting thing I found out was that Haskap juice changes color according to pH. This is just maybe 4 mils of Haskap juice in a small petri dish with filter paper. I wasn't sure what background I was going to use, so I wanted white in there. And so that's why there's these ridges. So Haskap juice is normally a little bit above 3.5, right? So it can be red, it can be purple, it can start getting green and dark. But if I allowed those to dry, I was wondering, well, can you dye paper with this? You know, can you make, does it have potential for fabric? When it dried, it changed colors again. So you could have anything from pink up to yellow if it's a high pH. So that's because as it dries, the concentration gets higher, and pH is dependent on concentrations. So I found a useful article on this having to do with elderberries, but I don't think it's widely known in fruit circles that some of the berries, I don't know how many other berries change color with pH, but it's almost like you could sell Haskap as a pH paper, organic pH paper, you know? You just buy that filter paper and use it. So I was trying it in yogurt, right? So 5, 10, 15, and 20%. Most of these dairy product types things, 20% really tasted good, like Haskap. Levels lower than that, and when I compared that to ice cream, the ice cream people must have been 5 to 10% that you didn't really taste Haskap. This was fun and outrageous, I think. Boiling mung bean noodles in Haskap juice. You can see we're really scraping to do something, right? Of course, this made me think of brains on Halloween. I don't know how useful this could be, but 5% Haskap juice gave this pink color. Maybe is there any mung bean candies or something? But anyway, it really seems to love pulse type crops. We'll see something else come up for coloring. So we also did types of milk and milk-like products. Coconut milk tasted like coconut milk when you add Haskap to it. There was really, 20%. We also tried 10% levels, but regular milk and skim milk curdled the milk if you poured it directly in. And later on, we found if we made Haskap juice go up to pH 7, it wouldn't curdle, but then it looked kind of gray. However, we have not tried this on the low acid Aurora. Maybe Aurora juice, which is half the acidity, maybe it wouldn't curdle. So that might be a specialized juice for it. This was the most surprising thing, that's soy milk. My brother drinks soy milk. I think it's absolutely disgusting. It just makes me cringe. It tasted like Haskap. I actually drank the soy milk, and I thought that's going to save the soy milk industry someday, maybe. Rice milk also tasted like Haskap. But look at, like, the color of that soy milk is so luxuriously purple. And this is kind of like blood red. I don't know how sellable that is, but I would really go on the soy milk if I had to go with any of the milk products. There's a difference between 10 and 20%. So when you look at the soy milk and the rice milk, it looks pretty similar, but I can see some definite less color in these other versions. There's from the top, you can see all the curdling going on. There it is close up. There it is with pH 7. Not such a hot selling point. So we did the similar test with juices. So now you could combine this with juices at different concentrations, but if you made it 20% with orange juice, it pretty much tastes like orange juice. If you add it to apple juice, that tastes like Haskap at 20%. When you add it to pineapple juice, it no longer tastes like pineapple or Haskap. It has a new flavor that I thought was intriguing, and my students rebelled and said, this is terrible. But I didn't think it didn't have any obnoxious thing, but it would be like my weird strawberries I talked about earlier. It's like, I need somebody to taste that and tell me what I should prejudice people to be like. Lemonade also, and this is, lemonade in that form is super sweet and super overpowering. It also tasted like lemonade. I'm sure you could do lighter lemon. I know people baking with Haskap have added a little touch of lemon juice sometimes and made it better. And actually lemon juice is how we made our Haskap a little more acidic. But grape juice was the best thing to combine with Haskap. Because at 10% Haskap, you tasted Haskap. Whereas apple, you needed 20%. However, we could have diluted that apple juice and had it weaker and figured out things. But as a starting point, if you're going to blend your Haskap with something, go with grapes first as your first choice. And these were a regular green grape type. It wasn't the Concord. I think the Concord might be a completely different flavor. I'm not sure I would want that. Or go with apple juice. Or there's also pear juice, but we didn't have any of that. So all the colors of all the different juices kind of look like a deep burgundy. This is what happens if you substitute 1 cup of water for 1 cup of Haskap juice and put it in a white cake mix. It becomes this Play-Doh brighter than Play-Doh purple. Shocking purple color. Right? It was like, whoa, we really woke up that morning looking at that stuff. And so, but we tried changing the pH. So, by adding lemon juice to it, we were able to make that that mix turn more pinkish. And we added baking soda to make it more acidic. So that's this forest green. And then we also slopped a bunch of them in together to see if it would it all blend after cooking, but really this didn't turn out well. We should have just poured the pink on one side and the purple on the other and let it bake in and see, what it would happen. So here's what happens when the 3 main ones came out. This is natural Haskap with the bright purple turned into the cupcake, right? With a little lemon juice, it got a little more pink. And the extra baking soda actually caused it to fizz up, reacting to the Haskap juice, and then deflate, right? A little bit in the middle there. But actually, the extra baking soda didn't make it taste like baking soda or anything. And of course, in Saskatchewan, we recommend that for Rough Rider fans for their chosen cake, right? We also tried frosting. So this is Haskap filtered, like almost pure juice, but this was just blenderized Haskap berries made into a slurry, right? So this was lower concentration, higher concentration. And this one we added a little baking soda to, but apparently, blue is in that range that it turns into so we must have just lucked out. If we'd gone further, we might have gotten green. But this was just mainly frosting bought pre-made at the grocery store. It made the frosting fizzle and get light and fluffy. And it tasted pretty good and seemed like a cool texture, almost like a whipped cream instead of frosting. But I wish I had kept it in the fridge to see if it would deflate over in the refrigerator at night or whether it would stably stay up. But I thought that was a really cool thing. And this reminds me of my son's, professor would have to be really scatterbrained, but anyway, my son's science project in which he took strawberry runners and he wanted to see how fast juice spliced would travel back to the mother plant for an experiment he wanted to do. And we weren't sure if red dye or purple dye, blue dye would show up best for his experiment. So we did red dye and blue dye in the strawberry runners, and the blue dye killed the runners. The red dye lived, and I'm like, what? Blue dye is a herbicide? But it also makes me think, you know, there's a lot of people that have allergies to dyes. And President's Choice used to have this ad, I don't know if it's still playing, saying they were not going to use any more artificial dyes in their products. However, when I sent them a copy of my research, I never heard anything back. But anyway, it is something, the trouble though with it, it's pH dependent, right? So you can't have blue if you want a super acidic product. You know, you've got to find the right product. Certainly, icing seems like something easy to mix as a dye. And I think that blue color is really kind of shockingly interesting. We probably could have done purple too. Puddings, it didn't matter. These were all light colored puddings. They all became deep burgundy. I was wondering if it would infiltrate into fruit. Have you ever seen these grapples? Anyone seen a grapple? You're lucky. I saw them first in Florida a decade ago, and now they're making them way into Saskatchewan. They take big apples and they infuse them with grape Kool-Aid flavor something. So they call it a grapple because it tastes like grapes, but Concord grape, but it's an apple. People think they're GMOs, but they're really Kool-Aid infused apples. So I was curious whether Haskap juice, we could make a Haskapple. So this was actually a pear and apple. We put slurry on them. Every hour we put more slurry on different ones, and then we cut them open, and we found it didn't infiltrate apples at all. So it didn't work out. And then further up more when we cooked with it, that's the wrong slide. It's coming up. When we cooked with it, it still didn't get in the middle. Right? I was kind of thinking, you know, those candied apples you see at Christmas time, maybe Haskap could do that. Guess not. So there, but that kind of looks kind of cute. Oh, that's a little writing on the website. But, there's a copy of that juice. This was actually an interesting bottle that they have a hole there, so you can leave your pop open. This is carbonated. You can have it open and it won't get decarbonated because that's blocking the exit. Like, they must spend tons of money on that jar. That's my take home is, if they're paying that much for the bottle, how much are they going to pay for the fruit to make it no longer a light color? Well, you can see the color coming through there. It's the slightest tint of purple. I think I'm getting some extra slide. So we did in rice. That wasn't as good as the mung noodle things. Okay, the slide seems to have extra things in it. This might be the extra ones. So we tried it in whipped cream. You could also make different colors whipped cream, but I think I whipped it too much to start with. Dream Whip is actually a dairy product. It didn't seem to curdle that.
Edible oil product.
Yeah. No, it was actually, it has milk is one of its first ingredients. But it comes as a powder. It's like a powdered milk. lemon jello, look too dark to be desirable, I think. This is just to mention, my wife and a volunteer and my technician's wife wrote this cherry cookbook that won an international award. We thought it was a scam when we got word. It turns out one of her friends' boyfriends is a chef and submitted this, and we got to go to Paris and we won best charity cookbook in Canada, or best cookbook, charity cookbook in Canada. But we found out there were more than one best. It was like a wine competition. You know, you can have several gold winners in the same show. But we have since run into many chefs who are extremely jealous. And I'm only pointing this out because they're writing a Haskap cookbook, right? So here's some of the pictures I've taken of Haskap. One of the mysteries solved by my research is now we know why cooking chicken with Haskap makes kind of greenish looking chicken. Right? We also, why is it doing that? Why? Well, now we know the chicken is too high pH. So if you're going to make chicken with Haskap, make it as a separate sauce to be added to the chicken after it's cooked. Right? So if you wanted to contribute, she's close to the end of submitting it, like she's just a month or so, but if you write her, Loretta Boers, one word at Hotmail, the difference she's doing in this cookbook is she's actually crediting your farm or whoever you want credited with your website and email address or whatever you want, so you could promote yourself if you have a good recipe. But yeah, so that's it on that. I think I'm about to switch on. Maybe I can answer a few questions. Got 5 minutes left. Or I could go on to the research phase right away. I probably have too much on the research part anyway.
So it has Captopiary?
No, that's from the Montreal Botanical Gardens when they had the mosaic culture stuff in 2013. I had been wanting to go to there for a decade.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Have you think mulching with sawdust, like spruce or pine, might affect the planted areas?
Yeah, someone asked me about it in the break. In Japan, they were mainly mulching with like straw, and they looked like kind of like bird nests. The breeder in Oregon mulches. She has hers all on raised beds, and then she gets sawdust, and she puts it all over. But of course, sawdust mixed into the soil would possibly make a nitrogen deficiency. We tried just regular shredded mulch, and we put it on like 3 inches shallow, and that was a mistake because weeds would still go through it. Then it was harder to hoe out the weeds. So if you're going to do mulch, I think it's got to be really thick so you know the weeds can't get through. I suspect in our climate it's probably not as good idea because our soil would warm up even slower. But here with a longer growing season, maybe okay. But that's certainly an alternative to consider for weed control.
But if it starts breaking down into the soil, then you're changing, then it might set off the balance.
Well, in the wild, it's always found in mixed, like conifers and deciduous trees, like it's mixture. So I think at the end of this thing, I talk about experiment. If you're going to do that, do a couple rows with it and without, or with different types of chips. And you know, a lot of provincial governments are now funding farmers to do experiments like that. You know, and you might even pick up a few $1,000s to do it. Talk to your ag reps. They really like that type of research.